Miriam was a sensitive and intelligent young university student who felt disenchanted with the world she lived in. She was deeply bored and frustrated by the purely materialistic aspirations promoted by society, the hypocritical discourse, the superficial conversations, and the banality of most people's interests. But she particularly hated social networks, which she considered the pinnacle of it all. One day, when Miriam was feeling particularly discouraged, she overheard some classmates talking about the dark web and the amazing things that could be found there. Perhaps driven by a desire to experience something new and escape the tedium of routine, she asked the young people about it. What they told her further fueled her interest in seeing what the dark web could offer her, perhaps a new, alternative world to the one she hated, so she learned how to access and navigate the dark web safely. That afternoon, as soon as she got home from the university, Miriam sat down at her computer and, following her classmates' instructions, installed and configured the Tor browser. After an exasperating wait, the browser finally displayed the home page, and she felt a mixture of excitement at the novelty and fear of the unknown growing within her. She finally began accessing directories, searching for terms related to topics that interested her, and browsing randomly and distractedly through the web pages that appeared. It's true that much of the content she accessed wasn't too different from what she could find every day on the surface web, and she even had to avoid some websites with content of dubious legality. But she also found forums and message boards about topics that interested her, where people who seemed to share many of her concerns and points of view were posting. Time passed so unnoticed that before she realized it, it was already late at night. Over the next days, Miriam continued visiting the dark web after completing her academic obligations, participating in exciting forum discussions and accessing increasingly hidden websites on the most extravagant topics. Until one afternoon, after an arduous and labyrinthine search through the intricate pages, her erratic navigation led her, she would never be able to say how, to a website unlike anything she'd ever seen before. Its name was Oblivion. On her monitor was what was clearly a social network, one she'd never heard of before. A certain feeling of weariness and animosity took hold of Miriam, who detested the frivolity and hypocrisy prevalent in the social networks used by so many people on the surface web. She made a move to leave the page, but before she could do so, she managed to read between the lines of some recent user posts displayed in a side panel, and what she read in those writings quickly sparked her ardent interest. She began to read more carefully. They were reflections, thoughts, and arguments of a depth and judgment she could never have imagined, from people who seemed capable of setting aside the simplistic, Manichaean arguments and frivolous trivialities prevalent in general discourse and engaging in debates about truly important, transcendental matters. Miriam experienced an enthusiasm she'd rarely felt, as she had rarely encountered people with such depth of thought that had sparked in her an interest comparable to the one she now felt for the authors of those posts. She found herself yearning, for the first time in her life, to join a social network. Despite everything, she had to overcome a certain fear, not just of the novelty, as she came to believe that not even her interests and reasoning reached the level exhibited by the Oblivion users. Finally, however, she took a deep breath, gathered her courage, remembered that she had come to the dark web precisely to experience new and different things from what she could find on the surface web, and accessed the subscription form. She had to provide the information usually requested on other websites, but one of the fields she had to fill out completely baffled her: date of death. She thought it was some kind of joke by the programmers of that unusual social network, so she left it blank. But when she pressed the confirmation button, the website indicated with red characters and marks that the field was mandatory. Miriam was even more puzzled, but since she had already entered her date of birth and, after all, she was already of legal age, she decided to simply enter the current date. The web form accepted her information this time, and after spending, as was usual on the dark web, endless minutes validating it, the Oblivion welcome screen finally appeared on her monitor, along with some contact suggestions. Among these, she was struck by the pale, even sickly appearance all the people displayed in their profile photos, but she thought this was simply due to the website's simple coding. The young woman began browsing Oblivion with renewed interest, observing the numerous discussion forums it hosted and the user profile suggested to her. She shyly began writing posts in the ones that caught her attention and even sent a few friend requests to various users. To her surprise, she quickly began receiving kind replies welcoming her, and even friend requests from other profiles. They all emphasized, to her surprise, how excellent her profile picture looked. However, it wasn't long before Miriam found herself immersed in stimulating and in-depth debates and enjoying the interaction, even virtual, with people who sparked her interest and with whom she felt she shared numerous concerns and perspectives on reality. Now she had a friendship around her like never before in her life. It was during those conversations, a few weeks later, when Miriam received a friend request from a girl of her age named Nuria, who lived in a town near hers. It didn't take long for Miriam and Nuria to become close friends, as their personalities were very similar and they shared almost all their tastes, opinions, and attitudes. Although Miriam didn't forget the many friendships she had made on Oblivion, every day when she logged into the social network, it was Nuria she spent the most time talking to. Some months passed, and one day, the affinity and affection Miriam had come to feel for Nuria led her to suggest they meet one afternoon to see each other in person and have a coffee, given that they lived very close to each other. Curiously, Nuria politely declined Miriam's proposal, arguing that she had obligations at home that prevented her from doing so, and that perhaps she could meet up with her later. This puzzled Miriam a little, but she didn't want to pressure her friend, so she accepted her explanation and waited a few days before suggesting it again. Several more times, Miriam suggested to Nuria that they meet, but Nuria always had some excuse or commitment that prevented her from doing so. Miriam was beginning to feel disconcerted, even annoyed, even wondering if Nuria was really the person she claimed to be. So one day, after Nuria refused again, Miriam told her friend that she didn't understand her attitude since they were such good friends and had such a good time talking. She told her friend that if she had a problem, she wanted to help her. Or maybe there was something she had said about herself that wasn't true and she didn't want them to see each other so she would find out. It took Nuria a while to reply, unlike what usually happened in her conversations with Miriam, but Nuria's answer left Miriam completely confused. Nuria humbly apologized, telling her that she understood her anger, and also why she had come to Oblivion, but it was clear that she was ignorant of the reality surrounding the social network and its users. She explained that, like her, she had always felt alone and marginalized in a world whose values and superficiality she abhorred and didn't share, and that was why she had felt such a close affinity with her. But now she had become her best friend, and that was why she was going to reveal to her what she didn't know about Oblivion. Before Miriam, now completely confused, could reply, Nuria sent her some coordinates through the chat box and told her they could meet the next day at that location, and that way she would understand the truth and the reason for her attitude. She then disconnected from the chat. Miriam felt completely stunned after that conversation. For a moment, she considered ignoring Nuria's instructions and not going to the meeting, recalling the numerous stories about encounters with people met on social networks who had turned out to be completely different from what had been portrayed online. But something inside her told her that Nuria couldn't be that kind of person. She felt the sincerity in her words, and it was inconceivable that she would want to harm her. She spent the entire night brooding over the matter, but finally, at dawn, she decided with all the resolve in her that she would go and meet Nuria and thus find out the reason for her strange behavior. The young woman drove to the town where Nuria lived, and using her cell phone, she navigated to the coordinates her friend had sent her. Surprise and bewilderment, however, took hold of Miriam when she discovered that the coordinates Nuria had sent her were located inside the municipal cemetery. She compulsively checked the information until she was convinced there was no mistake, and she began to think that perhaps it was some kind of macabre joke on Nuria's part, a side of her she perhaps ignored. The presence of other people in the area, however, reassured her, as she would not be alone in case of any trouble, a possibility she still refused to consider. But then, as she anxiously searched for any sign of Nuria, She noticed a tomb decorated with a lush bouquet of recently placed flowers. Above them, in the niche, Nuria's first and last name could be read, as well as a photograph that was the same one Nuria had as her profile picture on Oblivion. The unexpected revelation hit Miriam like an avalanche, as she felt overcome by complete stupor and agonizing unease. She fell to her knees on the floor, breathing heavily, and for a long time refusing to admit what her eyes were seeing. But it was true. There was no room for doubt. Nuria had left this world many years ago. Now she understood why she was so reluctant to meet her in person. Now she could understand the truth about the Oblivion social network.